He was the weakest adventurer who was stuck on the first floor of the dungeon, but after killing 1,000 slimes, he finds an ultra-rare card, which summons the strongest servant. The story begins with a boy named Kaido, as he faces off against a slime. It lunges at him, but he uses his bug killer spray to get rid of it, and he seems proud of his achievement. We learn that he's been in the dungeon for 2 years, but he still has the lowest status as an explorer because he can only kill the slimes on the first floor. He has managed to hunt 999 slimes, and he wants to finish his day by reaching 1,000. So he heads deeper into the dungeon, where he comes across a golden slime, and he sneaks up on it, using his spray to attack. But it dodges, so he pulls out his spray gun, which he uses to finish it off. But he's surprised that he didn't level up even though he killed a rare slime, so he decides to take its magic core, hoping it will be worth a lot. As he approaches the slime, he realizes it dropped a servant card. But he calms himself down and checks its stats, which confirms his suspicions. He looks around to see if he's alone, because he doesn't want anyone to take the card from him. He searches about what kind of card it is, and realizes there's no information available in the database. But he sees that it's a Valkyrie card, and he knows they're considered as demigods in mythology, so he wonders if it's a rare card. He comes across a group of explorers, and he tries to greet them, but they ignore him, and he wishes he had better equipment to be like them. So he thinks about selling the card for a high price, thinking he will be able to buy everything he wants. The receptionist Hitsugaya pays him 1,500 yen for the 3 slime cores, and before he leaves, he asks her how much an angel-type servant card would be worth. So she reveals that it sells for over 1 billion yen, and he can't believe how valuable it is. He runs into his friends Shinji and Hayako, who mention that they also have explorer passes, which allow them to enter attraction areas for free. They ask him if he's still at level 3, and he tells them he only kills slimes, so he isn't going to level up anytime soon. He wonders why they aren't returning to the dungeon, so they remind him about the first time they went to the 2nd floor, where they encountered their first goblin. They thought they could easily defeat it, but they ended up getting wrecked, and they had to use potions to heal themselves, but they decided to give up after the incident. They're surprised that he's been hunting slimes for 2 years, and still hasn't gotten bored of it, so they wonder what drives him to do it, but he says he has his reasons. He returns home, where his parents are worried his studies might be affected due to his work, but he assures them he's fine. As he takes a bath, he thinks about using the card, thinking it will give him the power to explore the deeper levels of the dungeon, but he knows he will be able to buy everything he wants if he just sells it. The next day, he runs into a classmate named Kasura, and they walk to school together. She mentions she saw him getting home late, and wonders where he went, but he lies, saying he was exploring the city with his friends. They come across Shinji and Hayako, but he quickly pulls them aside and asks them to cover for him, because he doesn't want her to know he goes to the dungeon. She asks them what they did the previous day, but when all 3 of them give a different answer, she starts thinking Kaido went to the dungeon, but he assures her this isn't the case. In their class, Kaido asks his friends what they would do if they found a rare servant card, but they tell him servants can only be summoned in the dungeon, thinking it isn't useful, so the best option is to sell it, since they're worth a fortune. He considers their advice, but they tell him not to worry, thinking he doesn't even have a servant card, because they're extremely rare. He knows they're right, because once he summons the servant, he won't be able to sell the card, but he wants to get stronger. So he heads to the dungeon, where he uses the card, and an enormous angel appears before him. It prepares to grab him, but she suddenly disappears, and turns into a girl, who introduces herself as Sylphie. He thinks she looks weak, so he immediately regrets his decision, thinking he has lost the opportunity to become a billionaire. She wonders if something's wrong with him, but he tells her he's okay, and takes her with him to hunt monsters. She immediately senses a slime, and she leads him to it. He's about to kill it with his spray, but he asks her to take care of it, since he wants to see her power. So she attacks it with her divine lightning spell, which leaves him speechless, and he realizes that she has 170 battle points, which means she's 17 times stronger than him. She tells him she's hungry, and he realizes that she wants to eat the slime's core, so he feeds it to her. She senses more slimes, and is about to go and defeat them, but he stops her, thinking he won't make any money, because she eats their cores after she kills them. But he comes up with an idea, and asks her to show him where they are, so that he can kill them with his spray. He finally levels up, and he learns a skill called Slime Slayer, which increases all of his stats by 50% when he's fighting slimes, but he thinks it isn't useful. Sylphie tries to cheer him up, telling him he's doing great because he finally learned a skill, and this makes him tear up. He's about to go home, but he promises to summon her again soon, and he orders her to return to the card. He visits Hitsugaya, who's surprised to see the amount of cores he has, telling him it's a record for the most slimes hunted in a day, and she reveals that they're worth 15,000 yen. At night, Kaido thinks about how powerful Sylphie is, and he thinks that with her help, he can go to the second level, but he's worried about facing a goblin. As he falls asleep, he dreams about a hero named Captain Katsuragi, who went deep into the dungeons to reveal its mystery, and everyone praised him for his courage and wisdom. The next day, Kaido heads to the second floor with Sylphie, hoping to find out what the dungeons really are and become a hero like Captain Katsuragi. But he suddenly starts trembling, so Sylphie wonders if something's wrong with him, but he assures her he's okay. She holds his hand, and this helps him calm down, so he thanks her. He recalls the time he went to the second floor 2 years ago, but she suddenly senses a goblin nearby. So he starts running away, but he remembers Captain Katsuragi, knowing he can't become a hero if he lacks courage. He starts slapping himself, which confuses Sylphie, but he tells her he's just pumping himself up. They sneak up on the goblin, and Kaido asks Sylphie to defeat it, since he doesn't have the courage to face it. So she prepares to use her divine lightning, but Kaido changes his mind, wanting to defeat it himself. But his legs start trembling, and he tells her to help him if it looks like he's in trouble. He takes a swing at the goblin, but he misses, and it charges at him, so he uses his shield to defend himself, pushing it back. He takes another swing, but it manages to disarm him, and it lunges at him, but he uses his spray to blind it. He retrieves his sword, and he prepares to deliver the finishing blow, but he trips on a stone, but he ends up stabbing the goblin by accident, allowing him to win the fight. He's about to cry, and Sylphie tells him he's amazing, but she thinks she should help the next time. He levels up, and is surprised that killing 1,000 slimes didn't do anything, but just defeating one goblin got him to level up. He learns a new skill called the Goblin Slayer, which is given to those who overcome their fear of goblins and defeat one on their own. It increases his stats by 10% when fighting a goblin, but it's only a temporary skill, because he got lucky during the fight. They start hunting more goblins, and Kaido's stats continue to increase. He wonders if Sylphie knows anything about the dungeon, but she explains that she doesn't, saying the only thing she knows is that she must be useful to her master. Kaido returns to Hitsugaya, who's surprised to see the goblin cores, and she's impressed that he was able to collect 4 cores on his first try. The next day, Kaido's mother wakes him up, but he's so tired that he can't move, and she tells him not to work so hard. He meets with Kasura, who thinks he went to a dungeon since his body is sore. But he denies it, telling her he started training like a bodybuilder because he wants to gain muscle, but she tells him that looking like that doesn't suit him. At school, he tells his friends that he has started hunting goblins, and they're surprised that he was able to defeat one. He's annoyed they doubted him, but he mentions that he now has more confidence in his abilities, so he will go even deeper into the dungeon. Kaido keeps hunting goblins, and manages to reach level 10, but is surprised by how much it has increased his stats. He acquires a new skill called God's Blessing, which is given to those loved by the gods, and it increases the boost in his stats whenever he levels up, depending on how much the gods love him. He's happy that he has finally acquired an overpowered skill, and he suddenly starts bowing to Sylphie because he believes the skill is linked to her. He grabs her hand, telling her he's glad he met her, and she's happy to have a master who cares for her. They come across a glowing skeleton, and Kaido thinks it's affected by his God's Blessing. Sylphie creates a barrier, and the skeleton tries to attack, but the barrier prevents it from reaching them. He uses his new weapon to hit the skeleton, but it doesn't seem to do any damage, and he's surprised by how durable it is. He tells Sylphie to use her divine lightning, so she uses it, and she's able to defeat the skeleton. But it only drops a core, so he's disappointed, since he thought it would drop a rare item. She tells him she's hungry, and he realizes the core is red, thinking it might be rare, but he decides to feed it to her anyway. After that, Kaido asks Hitsugaya about the value of the core, but he's shocked when she mentions it's worth over 2 million yen. She notices he's upset, realizing he lost a red core, but she tells him not to give up, because he might come across another glowing skeleton. At night, Kaido can't stop thinking about the money he lost, but he thinks Sylphie deserves a reward since she's been helping him. He knows that he was just a nobody before he met her, but he was able to get stronger thanks to her. He thinks he's ready to enter the 3rd floor, but he's worried that the monsters might attack him in groups. The next day, he tells Sylphie he will be fighting alone for a while, which makes her wonder if she did something wrong, asking him if he doesn't need her anymore. But he calms her down and explains that he's planning on entering the 3rd floor, but he doesn't want to become completely dependent on her, so he wants to get stronger. He tells her he trusts her and sees her as his little sister instead of a servant, so she thinks she's lucky to have him as her master. A goblin suddenly appears, and he asks her to let him take care of it, but he ends up getting injured. Kaido buys a potion from Hitsugaya, but it's incredibly expensive, so he goes broke. But he knows that in order to reach the 3rd floor, he needs to get new equipment and stock up on magic cores for Sylphie to eat. The next day, he goes to the 1st floor to hunt slimes, and as he tells his friends about his plan, Kasura overhears him, but he manages to convince her that they're talking about something else. He manages to collect a bunch of cores, and prepares to enter the 3rd floor, but Sylphie suddenly senses a silver slime. He attacks it with his spray gun, and it tries to run away, but Sylphie kills it with her divine lightning. It drops a devil-class servant card, and he wonders if he should use it, but he always wanted to have both a god and a devil beside him. So he decides to use it, and a girl named Luceria appears before him. Kaido is disappointed, since she's nothing like the picture on her card, and she thinks he's too dumb to be her master. Sylphie is scared of her, so she hides behind him and tells her to respect their master, but Luceria explains that she means them no harm, saying she's just behaving like a devil. She mentions that she's hungry, but he tells her she hasn't done anything yet, and Sylphie senses a slime nearby, so Luceria tells him to feed her after she gets rid of it. She summons her spear and uses it to shoot a fireball, which causes a massive explosion, but he thinks this type of power is expected from her, since she has 130 battle points. He gives her the magic core it dropped, and she eats it, but she asks for more. He refuses her request, so she calls him cheap, but he tells her to use her corrosive breath, and she's annoyed that he wants her to do more, but he promises to give her another core. They come across a goblin, and she uses her corrosive breath, which instantly melts the goblin, but everyone's scared by how terrifying her attack was. She eats the core, and finds it more delicious than the one dropped by the slime, so she wants to go deeper into the dungeon. But Kaido stops her, saying he needs to get new equipment before they enter the 3rd floor, and he thinks she must be tired. But she still wants to go further into the dungeon, so Sylphie tells her he's only saying it because he cares for her, and she decides to wait until tomorrow. The next day, they head to the 3rd floor, and Kaido reveals that he bought an expensive crossbow, but Luceria tells him that the quality of a weapon doesn't depend on its price. They see 2 hellhounds, and he shoots them with his crossbow, but he misses, and they start charging at him. So Sylphie creates a barrier, as Luceria blows them away. He gives her one of the cores as a reward, but she wants both, since she defeated the 2 hellhounds. But he refuses, promising to give her more after they defeat other enemies, and she threatens to send him to hell if he's lying. 2 wild boars attack them, and Luceria tries to blow them up, but one of them manages to get past. Kaido decides to take care of it, so he shoots an arrow, which hits its eye, but it still keeps rushing towards him. He falls down as he panics, and Sylphie tries to help him, but he shoots another arrow, which ends up hitting the boar's head, and manages to kill it. Sylphie praises him, and Luceria tells him he fell because he panicked, but he tells her he just tripped. After that, Kaido realizes he wasn't able to make money, because Luceria kept asking for his course. He hears a group of girls talking about reaching the 6th floor after forming a party, and he wonders if he will also be able to reach it with Sylphie and Luceria. At school, Kaido's friends wonder why he's so happy, because they're worried about finding a university, but he hasn't given it a single thought. Kasura hears them, and wonders which university he's aiming to get into, so he tells her he still wants to be in the same school as her. In the dungeon, we see Kaido hunting monsters, and when Luceria eats all the cores, he asks Sylphie if something's bothering her, but she tells him she's okay. At home, Kaido watches a movie, which makes him think Sylphie and Luceria are going to fight each other, so he needs to do something to stop them. The next day, Kasura realizes Kaido didn't sleep last night, so she wonders what's been bothering him. He can't tell her about his real problem, so he mentions that his friends know two girls with opposite personalities, and it seems the nice one doesn't like the other girl. He asks for her advice on how to get them to like each other, and she tells him to ask the nice girl how she feels. In the dungeon, Kaido summons Sylphie and asks her if she hates Luceria, so she explains that she was scared of her at first, but she has come to like her. He thinks something must be bothering her, since she has been acting strange lately, and he wants her to be open with him, because she's important to him. So she tells him one thing is irritating her, which is the fact that he has been kind to Luceria, and she wants him to treat her the same way. She explains that he has been giving Luceria more cores to eat, and ever since Luceria showed up, he hasn't been talking to her, so he assures her he will work on these things. As they continue their journey, Kaido praises Sylphie, but this makes Luceria jealous, and she asks him to praise her as well. They come across a wild boar, and Sylphie levels up after she defeats it, so she becomes happy, and she gives the credit to Kaido. 3 hellhounds are about to attack them, and he asks her to take care of them, because he wants to see how much stronger she has become. So she uses her divine lightning, and he's impressed that she was able to defeat all of them in an instant. A wild boar rushes towards them, so she protects everyone with a barrier, and he realizes it lasts longer than before. Luceria is about to finish it off, but Kaido wants to do it himself, so he shoots an arrow at the boar. He gives 2 magic cores to Sylphie, and nothing to Luceria, since she didn't do anything in the fight, but Sylphie asks him to give her more, because she's still hungry. He realizes that her appetite increased with her level, and as he goes to Hitsugaya, she notes that he has been bringing back fewer cores. He returns to the first floor to hunt slimes, and Luceria wants to help, but he stops her, because if they help him, he won't have any cores to sell. Luceria tells him he shouldn't have summoned them if he isn't going to let them do anything, but Sylphie mentions they're there to support him. He tells them their support encourages him, so Luceria decides to cheer for him. Hitsugaya is surprised that Kaido is bringing slime cores again, because she thought he would have gone to the 4th floor. But he knows his equipment is too weak for the 4th floor, so he searches online for armor and weapons, but when he finds a suit he likes, he's shocked to see how expensive it is. The next day, they find a special slime, and Kaido tells them they have to defeat it no matter what, so Sylphie and Luceria obliterate it with their spells. He thinks he will get another servant card, but is surprised to find a magic orb. He gets excited, because it will allow him to fulfill his dream of becoming a wizard, so he decides to use it. He breaks the ball and acquires a new water spell, so he wants to test it on a hellhound. He tells Sylphie to create a barrier around them and asks Luceria to interfere if he fails to defeat the hellhound. He shoots a water ball, and he manages to land a direct hit, but it doesn't do anything. The hellhound lunges at them, and Luceria defeats it, but he's disappointed by how weak his new spell is, thinking he should have sold the magic ball. At night, Kaido runs into Kasura, and he thanks her for her advice, because he was able to solve the problem between the 2 girls. So she realizes that he was asking her for selfish reasons, but he assures her it was for his friends. She decides to call it a day, but Kaido thinks something's off about her, wondering if she's jealous he has another girl in his life, but he thinks it's impossible. Kaido returns to the dungeon, where he works on improving his water ball, and he learns how to transform its shape, but he ends up getting exhausted, and he collapses. As he leaves the dungeon, he bumps into a girl named Ari, who realizes he's exhausted, telling him to be more careful. He apologizes for bumping into her, and he walks away, as she realizes that he's been training hard. Her companion Miku thinks he's a weirdo, but her friend Hikari thinks they should work as hard as him, so they decide to hunt as many monsters as they can. We see Kaido in his classroom, as his teacher scolds him for sleeping during her lecture, and he tells her he's going to train hard, so everyone laughs at him. His friends ask him why he's training, so he tells them he's trying to improve his water ball, thinking it's going to be useful during his raids. But Kasura hears him, asking him if he's been training in the dungeon, so he denies it, telling her he's trying to learn how to dance, and she advises him to take care of himself. Kaido uses his water ball on a goblin, shoving it into its mouth, and the goblin ends up drowning. But he realizes that he's stuck at level 11 because he isn't getting enough experience from the monsters on the 3rd floor, so he thinks about heading deeper into the dungeon. The next day, we see him wearing the expensive suit he saw online, but Luceria tells him he looks like a loser. He explains that it protects his body, but the material is thin, so he still feels pain when he gets hit. He adds that he bought a bracelet, which increases the effectiveness of his spells, thinking it will make his water ball stronger, but he reveals that he hasn't tested it yet. They reach the 4th floor, but Sylphie senses a dangerous monster and a giant cockroach appears. So the girls panic and they start blasting it with their spells, as Kaito explains that the 4th floor is filled with roaches, but he realizes that they left him behind. We see them on the 5th floor, and Kaito catches up to them as Sylphie tells him they were scared. She apologizes for rushing ahead, but he tells her he isn't angry, telling her they were able to clear the 4th floor in an instant. He reveals that he collected the cores of the roaches, and he feeds them, but they don't like it, thinking it tastes terrible. They decide to explore the 5th floor, and he sees monsters made of sand and mud, so he shoots them, but he realizes that his attacks are working because they're immune to physical damage. So he asks for Luceria's help, and she uses her hellfire to burn them away, as he realizes that he needs to rely on the girls to defeat the monsters on that floor. They head deeper into the dungeon, but Sylphie mentions that she senses something behind a wall, so she destroys it, and they realize that there's a secret passage. They decide to check it out, as Kaito tells the girls to be careful, thinking the place is dangerous. But Luceria activates a trap, and an arrow hits him, so he squirms in pain. After he recovers, they continue their journey, and they see a massive door at the end of the passage, as Sylphie mentions that she senses a powerful presence inside. He can't open it, thinking they need an item to enter, but Sylphie uses her divine lightning, blowing a hole into the door, and they enter the room, where they encounter 2 boss monsters. They decide to defeat the ogre first, so the girls blast it with their spells, but they realize it's immune to magic, and it lunges at them, so Sylphie protects everyone with her barrier. He orders Luceria to deal with the slime, and he starts shooting the ogre, realizing it's vulnerable to physical attacks. But he runs out of arrows, and he realizes that Luceria is struggling because the slime is also immune to magic. So he uses his water ball, but it suddenly turns into ice, as he realizes that his bracelet enhanced his magic. He launches it at the ogre, and they realize it's working, but he only has 3 shots left because he's running out of mana. So he transforms the water balls into spikes, and he aims for the ogre's head, allowing him to defeat it. The slime is about to hit Luceria, but he protects her, trying to stop it, but his shield starts melting. Sylphie uses her divine spear, blowing a hole into the slime, but they realize it's still alive, so he considers retreating, but he remembers Captain Katsuragi, thinking he can't become a hero if he runs away. So he charges in, and he starts attacking it with his spray, as Sylphie protects him with her barrier. He pulls out his spray guns, and he keeps spraying until its health reaches 0. The slime disappears, so the girls celebrate, but they realize he's injured, so he drinks a potion to heal himself. Luceria levels up, and he realizes that he has reached level 15, so he thinks he can keep up with the other explorers. He checks the monster's drops, and he sees a red core, along with a magic sword, which he realizes is a rare item, but he wonders why it looks like a kitchen knife. He tries selling the red core, but Hitsugaya wonders where he found it, so he tells her about the hidden dungeon, and she decides to send someone to investigate it. She reveals that he found a special magic core, and its value is unknown, but she agrees to buy it for a high price. She invites him to join an upcoming event, saying the explorers will form parties to investigate the 7th floor, and he agrees to participate. Kaito returns to his classroom, where he brags to his friends, telling them he's about to clear the 6th floor so that he can join the event, saying he's excited to form a party with other explorers. Kasura asks them if they're talking about a dance party, so they convince her that he's planning to attend one, so she tells him she wants to join. Kaito attends the event, realizing countless adventurers have decided to participate, and he meets Ari's group, wondering if they are going to be his party. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.